You're really throwing Tavis and Cornell under the bus, and they are really failing us.
Is that what you were saying?
So, well, like, look, these guys,
let me be clear what I meant. So I would include myself in that. This is what I meant. So your book, Touré, is actually an attempt to help us make sense of the moment, of particular black folks in the moment. What I meant by that was, instead of more books and more substantive discussion like I think we've had here tonight, we get certain black public intellectuals calling one another whores or fakes or frauds, or instead of focus on how do we understand the oppression and exploitation of black folks and brown folks in this country, and what do we need to do, and how has racism changed? There are a range of questions that should be on the table instead of this really petty, personal, well, I don't like her, I don't like him. So that's what I meant. It's not that we're not trying, and people have been trying to make sense of the moment in real time and historically informed.
But I mean, what it comes down to here, and I think this is probably the most important point that I will make tonight, is that ultimately the Schomburg Center is a lighthouse in a sea of darkness. And more to the point, that evidence that I talked about of what's not being taught our kids is a long-standing political project. In other words, the silence of robust, sustained, smart, intelligent, critical, engaged discourse does not make Wall Street money. And therefore, it is not profitable in the media. I mean, we have a white majority population that every single generation, including the slavery period, to the postbellum period, to the Jim Crow era, to the present, has proclaimed racism dead. Now, that's a complicated thing because we think back, we use our hindsight and we think, well, it was very clear that it was racism. But let me use this one example. Plessy versus Ferguson, which was the Supreme Court decision that enshrined segregation as the law of the land,
1896.
recognized fundamentally black people's political and constitutional rights. That was the equal part. The separate part was an explicit recognition that one race was inferior to the other. That was not racism to them. That was the facts as they were. These people are not like us. They are beneath us. And so therefore, there has always been a counter movement to silence, to marginalize evidence and critique that drew or deconstructed that political process, that proclaimed, as Langston Huston did, that black people came from ancient civilizations that helped to create the modern world. That was suppressed, just as civil rights history is today. So it's not a surprise that petty bickering shows up on cable television and in our media conversation. And conversations like this do not.
I mean, the nature of television itself does not lend to intellectual discourse.
No, it's true, but it hasn't always been. Not only has it not always been.
That's right, that's right. No, if you look back at the 60s television, Mike Wallace is smoking, they're having an actual conversation.
Not only that, but this debate here, and I'm agreeing with you.
But I'm not defending.
The debate here is inspired. What we're doing on this stage is inspired by the televised debates that former intelligent, I mean, even conservatives like William F. Buckley were well-read, thoughtful people. They could fundamentally disagree with how the world should be, but it wasn't sound bites that they were speaking in.
No, and it is corrosive to the American intelligence to speak in these soundbiting ways where you have to say your thesis right away, and then a moment later you're rushed back into the green room to wipe off your makeup. But the point that I was getting to was that there is another beacon of light beside the Schomburg, which is that the Melissa Harris Perry show is actually, which comes on weekends, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 12, which is actually allowing us to have black people in substantive conversation where we sit and talk about something for 20, 25 minutes, and the same people sit there for 30 to 45 minutes and get to think and talk, and this brilliant woman allows us to pontificate intellectually, and it's extremely valuable television and completely running opposite the sort of soundbitey thing that we're getting so many other places. So I'd encourage us to watch that, because that's substantive.
Last word.
Well, I just say that the university from which I recently came from is becoming an echo chamber. And in the same way that parts of the advocacy world, I mean, there is an industry that perpetuates itself just for the purposes of producing new research and ad nauseum. I mean, I think the world that Dorian is operating in, the work that Touré is doing, and certainly what the Schomburg stands for, is an applied knowledge base. What do we do with what we know to make it meaningful and impactful to people, particularly young people? So one, that they can celebrate, even in the closet, their infinite blackness. I mean, I'm being tongue-in-cheek when I say that, but we want them to do it on the street. But we also don't want them to get stopped and frisked, right? But we need people who are smart to not give up on the public discourse. I feel like a lot of smart people and a lot of committed, passionate people who know from experience have given up on the public discourse, have simply turned away because they're tired of the same conversation, they're tired of the same battles, and they've given up. And we can't let that happen, because the conversation is getting worse, the reality is getting worse.
Thank you.
Touré and I will debate again, except we'll be on the tennis court. Because he brags about growing up playing tennis, and so did I.
So Dorian, Khalil, or Gibran, and Touré, thank you so much.